Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. The winter meetings has just come to an end in Dallas, Texas. It has been an eventful off-season in baseball so far. What I do to be in the winter meetings in Dallas right now. Unfortunately, that isn't quite a reality and won't be a reality for any time soon. It is what it is. So, just before the winter meetings took place in Dallas, Texas, on Saturday we got a big signing. It is Willie Adames who signed with San Francisco from Milwaukee to San Francisco. He signed a $182 million deal with San Francisco that beats Buster Posey's deal for franchise record signing. That's kind of funny because Buster Posey right now is the president of baseball operations in San Francisco. He's the guy who handed the contract to Willie Adames. So the left side of the infield is now set for San Francisco. Remember last year they signed Matt Chapman to a 1 year deal, I believe. No, it was a 2 year deal. No, it was three 1 year deals. So one and one and one. So instead of having Matt Chapman opt out and retest free agency, San Francisco gave him a 6 year, $151 million extension, and he took the money. So now they have the left side of their infield completely locked up. And of course, now the big news that we all been waiting for on Sunday evening, it was announced that Juan Soto has signed a 15-year, $765 million contract with the New York Mets. That is a professional sports record in all sports, not just baseball, all of professional sports. It is a generational contract, and yeah, you might say it was an overpay. I could say it was worth every single penny because, well, I'm not just saying that because Juan Soto is my all-time favorite player, but Juan Soto is a generational player. He's only 26 years of age, already helped carry his team to a World Series back in 2019 when he was with Washington. It is also assumed that his hitting tool, his ability to walk, is going to age gracefully. Defensively, he isn't that great, and on the base pads, he's not super quick, but he is a pure hitter. He is expected to age quite well, and a caveat to this contract is that by the end of year five, Juan Soto has the ability to opt out. However, the New York Mets can void the opt out by upping his AAV for the remaining 10 years from 51 mil to 55 mil. So essentially, that would make his contract a 15-year, $805 million contract. That is absolutely insane. Remember, back when he was in Washington, he turned down a $350 million extension. I think that was early in 2022. And then finally, just before the trade deadline, he turned down a 15-year, $440 million extension that prompted his trade to San Diego. And then at the end of the 2023 season, in the winter meetings, the last day of the winter meetings then in Nashville, Juan Soto was traded from San Diego to the New York Yankees. San Diego realized that it needed to cut payroll and it wasn't going to give him the 500, 600, $700 million contract that that Soto and Boris were asking for. And then so finally he went to free agency after playing 1 year with the Yankees, played absolutely well, hit a career high 41 home runs. Yankees went to the World Series. They lost to the Dodgers in 5 games. And eventually got to the point there was a bidding war between the Mets and the Yankees. Of course, you got the Dodgers involved, you got Boston involved, you got Toronto involved. Eventually, it came down to the New York Mets and Steve Cohen, their owner, just not wanting to be outbid. He was not going to get outbid. So even if Cashman or rather Hal Steinbrenner, the owner of the Yankees, if he said I'm going to go 800 mil, then you got Cohen. He's going to say 815 mil, and probably with the same situation with the opt outs. 815 with the possibility be, I don't know, 850, 860. He was not going to get outbid. So all the stories you hear about with the suites and the security, to me that's just bullshit because Steve Cohen was not going to get outbid for his guy. He was not going to get outbid for Juan Soto, and hence Juan Soto is a New York Met. And before we get to the Fried and Crochet deals, because these are the two big things that happened at the winter meetings right after the one Soto sweepstakes. The one sweepstakes now coming to an end. I'd been anticipating them for a while. So we gotta go talk about Curt Flood, Marvin Miller, Peter Seitz, Garrett Cole. So Curt Flood was a very, very accomplished outfielder for St. Louis back in the 1960s. Very good with the glove, very good with the bat, hit for average. And at the end of the 1969 season, he got into a contract dispute with his owner, and then eventually Curt Flood gets traded to Philadelphia. He did not want to play for Philadelphia, and back in the days, there was no free agency. All players were bound to a reserve clause. The reserve clause essentially, once a player as an amateur, he signed with a professional club, or he got drafted. Eventually, he got drafted to a professional club. He was bound to that club. He was that club's property. The club pretty much set the salary for the player. He could not leave. He could not negotiate. He could not talk with anybody else. So the only leverage he really had was holding out. Otherwise, he could not play professional baseball anywhere else. He had to either retire or reconsider and sign the contract that had the reserve clause. And so Curt Flood, he looks at the trade and he said, "No, I'm not going to Philly. I spent 12 years, I believe it was 12 years in St. Louis." Then he said, "I'm not going to Philly." So he sends a letter to then Commissioner Bowie Kuhn. Predictably, Bowie Kuhn rejects his request to become a free agent. Bowie Kuhn, obviously the commissioner, paid by the owners, and of course because he works for the owners and he is paid by the owners, he was not going to grant Curt Flood his right to be a free agent. So Curt Flood decides to sue Major League Baseball, and the players' union had just formed recently, and Marvin Miller was the first. He was the first president. He was the first union leader of the MLBPA, and Marvin Miller, he represented steelworkers before he got into Major League Baseball, or rather the Players Association, MLBPA. So Marvin Miller heard from Curt Flood he wants to sue Major League Baseball through the legal system, and Marvin Miller told Curt Flood, this could pretty much end your career. And Curt Flood, of course, he looks and he says, "Well, I want to do what's right." So eventually, long story short, he goes to the Supreme Court, he loses. And Curt Flood's career is pretty much over because he's blackmailed by the owners. The owners do not want anything to do with a guy who sued Major League Baseball and now has to be employed by them. So his career was eventually over. But this was 1972, I believe, or 73. However, in 1975, the players, they felt a lot more empowered by the reserve clause and the fight for free agency. Actually, let's go back even before that. Let's go to the 1974 offseason. Catfish Hunter. Catfish Hunter was a pitcher for Oakland, and he helped them win 3 World Series titles in a row. And then eventually he got into a contract dispute with Charlie Fisher, I believe, the owner of the Oakland A's at the time. And eventually the contract dispute had it in a way that, of course, he breached the contract, and then eventually it went to the MLBPA. He went to the MLBPA and said, "They breached the contract, Charlie Finley, and I'm a free agent." And of course, the owners, they absolutely went berserk when they heard that. They said, "No, this is bullshit. You can't be a free agent. This is fucking ridiculous." So then it went to the arbitrator, Peter Seitz, and Peter Seitz said, "Yes, he's a free agent. You breached the contract." And eventually, Catfish Hunter, he signed with the New York Yankees. His contract went from, I believe, $100,000 a year to 5 years, $3 million to $600,000. Because remember, the reserve clause only it negated the need for long-term deals, because the reserve clause essentially said that if we can't come to a dispute, well, the 1 year is renewable. So, but the players kept signing over and over and over again, so it kept kicking that clause in. They really didn't know any better. The union quite didn't get strong yet. But yes, so finally the players found a way out of this. They found a way out of this reserve clause. So the following year we got Dave McNally and Andy Messersmith. Dave McNally, and I believe he pitched. No. Dave McNally pitched for Baltimore, and Andy Messersmith pitched for the Dodgers. Funnily enough, in that 1974 World Series with Catfish Hunter, the Dodgers made it to the World Series that year. They lose to Oakland. So Andy Messersmith, he wanted a no trade clause in his contract, and the owner of the Dodgers, Walter O'Malley, at the time said, "No, I'm not going to do that." So he doesn't sign the piece of paper. So he basically plays the entire 1975 season under the 1974 contract, with the reserve clause. And after the season, he said, "I'm a free agent," because basically the clause actually said it was renewable for 1 year and not for perpetuity. So of course it goes to the arbitrator Peter Seitz, and on the 23rd of December 1975, Peter Seitz heard both cases. He heard the player's side, and then he heard the owner's side, and he said, yes, it expressly says 1 year, so it is a 1 year contract. He fulfilled the contract in 1974, and he fulfilled the 1975 renewed year, so he is a free agent. So eventually that's how the reserve clause got struck down. And now pretty much free agency has existed since 1975. And one thing that really struck me was in 2019 when Garrett Cole signed with the New York Yankees. At the time, it was the richest contract ever given to a pitcher. Of course, Yamamoto beat it last year. Garrett Cole said on his press conference, "I'd like to thank Curt Flood, Marvin Miller for striking down the reserve clause for making free agency a reality, because without free agency, none of this would have been possible. We wouldn't have this player movement, we wouldn't have this increase in salary, because remember, because of the reserve clause, teams were not allowed to talk to you, so your salaries were left down. The player salaries were let down, and because there were not teams bidding for your services, so that pretty much artificially kept the market down. But when you saw, for example, with Garrett Cole's case back in 2019, you got the Dodgers bidding on him, the Angels bidding on him, the Yankees bidding on him, and all of a sudden, his contract went to 9 years and $324 million. And remember, when Catfish Hunter became a free agent, he was the first free agent back in the winter of 1974. His contract was 5 years, $3 million. 5 years, $3 million. The league's first free agent, and in this case, Garrett Cole, 9 years, $324 million. So absolutely incredible. I feel every player has to be thankful for Curt Flood, Marvin Miller. All of them should be thanking them in their press conference, in their introductory press conference, every time they sign a big deal. So far, only Garrett Cole has done that. So I commend Garrett Cole. Very smart guy. Went to UCLA. Very involved with the players' union. I don't believe he's a union head anymore, but he probably had to do with it. So talking about the Yankees, so Garrett Cole obviously will headline the rotation. They signed Carlos Rodon back in 2022-23. So two Boris clients, Cole and Rodon. And then they added Max Fried. So Max Fried, not a Boris client, but Max Fried has the highest contract for a left-handed starting pitcher. Max Fried, 8 years, $218 million with the New York Yankees. Remember, the Yankees, their bid for Juan Soto was 16 years, $760 million, and so they had money to spend, and they had the opportunity to nab a starting pitcher, one of the best starting pitchers on the market. So Max Fried always wanted to, it seemed like there was a narrative he wanted to go to the West Coast. He's from Santa Monica, or was born in Santa Monica, went to Harvard Westlake, but the Dodgers, I assume that's his childhood team, the Dodgers, they pivoted early and they signed Blake Snell to a 5-year, $182 million contract. So it led to Max Fried going elsewhere, and instead Max Fried he saw the desperation of the Yankees and Boston. Both teams missed out on Juan Soto, so they all had money to spend. So Max Fried, he nabs a deal with the New York Yankees. He gives the Yankees a very formidable rotation with Garrett Cole, Max Fried, Carlos Rodon. The fourth pitcher is the Rookie of the Year, Luis Heel, and we'll see if they get Marcus Stroman back on track at the 5 spot. Remember, they signed Marcus Stroman last year as a free agent, but unfortunately he faded down the stretch, and he pretty much wasn't used in the postseason. So good luck to you, Max Fried. Good luck to Max Fried in New York. So one thing I found interesting about Max Fried's signing was the highest contract to a left-handed pitcher back then. Before him was David Price, who he signed it with Boston back in 2016, and he was traded to LA in 2020 as part of the infamous Mookie Betts deal. And then the next highest was Kershaw's deal, 210 mil, Dodger legend. And then the fourth highest is Blake Snell, 182 million with the Dodgers. So Max Fried beat three Dodgers for the highest contract for a left-handed starting pitcher. He's a ground ball pitcher, so we'll see if the Yankees will shore up that infield defense because, well, the Yankees defense last year not very great. And it all culminated in that Game 5 loss where they blew a 5-0 lead and eventually ended up losing the World Series. So after that, Boston responded the following day. That's yesterday the 11th. They land Garrett Crochet. Garrett Crochet is finally leaves baseball purgatory, which is the Chicago White Sox, and he gets traded for a 4 package prospect. I feel bad for them, but yeah, they're going from Boston to Chicago, so kind of a Chris Sale 2.0. So last year, Garrett Crochet hit his season season inning season inning limit high. No, his innings. He had a high in he had a season high in innings. He's pitched the most ever innings in his career. Obviously, he suffered from Tommy John. He missed a lot of time. He was in and out of the bullpen. Last year was his first year as a starter. He was a hot commodity to be traded at the deadline last year until it was revealed that he wanted an extension. He wanted an extension to pitch in the postseason, which he had every right to do that because it was his arm on the line, and if he got hurt and it was time for him to get paid as a free agent, teams could say, "Nah, you're damaged goods, fuck off." They could absolutely do that, and yeah, that's generally teams will use a player when they're under team control. They'll use them down to the ground until it is time for them to get paid, which is why I'm always for players getting paid. So Garrett Crochet, obviously, he did not get an extension. He might get an extension done with Boston, but as of right now, no extension is done with Boston. Of course, technically, he doesn't really have the right to. I mean, he has the right to ask for an extension. Just the team that trades for him doesn't really have to adhere to it because Garrett Crochet is still under team control. He does not have a no trade clause, obviously, because he has below 6 years of service time. A team does not have to give a no trade clause if you have less than 6 years of service time because they control you regardless. So anyway, Boston will control him for 2 more years. We'll see if they get the extension done or if Garrett Crochet is keen on testing free agency. We'll see if Boston is also interested in extending him long term or if Boston is okay with letting him walk and go to free agency. But as of right now, he will have 2 years in Boston to prove to the open market and of course to the Red Sox themselves that he is a very, very capable pitcher. I mean, he is a capable pitcher, but he needs to prove that he's durable because of his history of injuries. And last year he already had pitched a career high in innings, so he's gonna headline Boston's rotation. And wow, it so far has been an absolutely eventful winter meetings. Can't wait an absolutely eventful offseason. And I can't wait to see what happens to the rest of the offseason. Remember, Teoscar Hernandez, still a free agent. We'll see if he goes back to LA. I'll say 50-50 on that for LA's case because I support LA. I do not see Walker Buehler or Jack Flaherty coming back to LA. They're both going to get the bag somewhere else. Kike probably will come back to LA. We'll see about that. Kershaw's a lock to come back. And they're going to wait for spring training, I believe, to sign Clayton Kershaw because that's when the 60-day injured list becomes available. So we'll see over there. I mean, outside LA, Alex Bregman, free agent. We heard some links with Detroit in the past. We heard some links with the Yankees. Probably the Yankees even more desperate now that they have to replace Juan Soto's offense. Actually, the Yankees, they already had offensive problems. They had a bunch of holes offensively, even with Juan Soto in the lineup. It was pretty much Soto, Judge, and 7 other guys. So we'll see how the Yankees retool their offense post Juan Soto. Pete Alonso is still a free agent. Maybe he goes to New York. Maybe he doesn't. Christian Walker is also available there. Both Christian Walker and Christian Walker and Pete Alonso will both cost draft picks because both rejected the qualifying offer. But of course, Christian Walker will probably get a 3-4 year deal, while Pete Alonso will get a much longer deal, 7-8 years. So we'll see how it goes there. For the outfield, of course, we got Teoscar Hernandez, as already mentioned, and Anthony Santander, who recently played for Baltimore, switch hitting outfielder, career high in home runs at 41. And then finally, the big fish is Corbin Burns, starting pitcher. It was, so far, what I've heard is San Francisco and Toronto. So we'll see where Corbin Burns goes. So yeah, guys, so enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see what happens in the offseason. Bye-bye.